Patrick Cripps from the Carlton Footy Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
James Orko here from the Brisbane Lions.
Jason Johannesson from the Western Bulldogs.
Luke Parker here from the Sydney Swans.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club.
This is Matt Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hello, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel, the number 28 player in the 50 most relevant. Yep, almost halfway. Is GWS mid-forward Toby Greene. He ended last year as arguably one of the must-have forwards with an absolute flying scores to end the year. But entering into 2020 with limited premiums available in our forward line, is he someone we need to look at again this year? Joining me for a couple of days, we've had him in a row now. I've got the Fox. Hello, buddy.
Hey, MJ. Hey, listeners. Yeah, he was at 20 last year at a lot better price, wasn't he?
He was. He was coming in, entry into 2019 at a little bit of a discount. We saw, though, some of the best of Toby Greene. We saw some of the worst of Toby Greene. And we saw what we kind of expect year in, year out. Let's delve into that year a little bit. Still just 26 years old. There was some concern amongst the fantasy community. He might lose his forward eligibility. There was nothing to be worried about there. He holds dual position. He is a mid-forward. He's going to have some pretty nice scores to look at, though. A 146 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team was his top score of the year. That was against the Swans. While against Richmond, 138 was his SuperCoach best. It was arguably one of his best years in 5 or so years since he broke out in a real way, and that is because last year he averaged 98.4 in AFL Fantasy Dream Team, 93.9 in SuperCoach. He's a little bit pricey in some of the formats, and that is because in Dream Team and Fantasy, he's the number 2 ranked forward in terms of averages. Yep, that's how many good forwards we've lost. $730,000 in AFL Fantasy is his starting price. $711,000 in SuperCoach, and in Dream Team in SuperCoach, he's just over $500,000. For the past couple of years, Fox, as we talk about Toby Greene, while he's been consistent in a couple of things and missing games of footy is certainly one of them, one of the things we have seen quite consistently over him is he's that kind of guy that just year in, year out seems to average around about that 90 marker. And last year, he did that again, albeit a little bit with a nice run home to get him there.
Yeah, true, MJ. Historically, he's been very consistent, hasn't he? And usually, apart from last year a little bit, his scoring basement has been pretty good too. He's a very tough matchup. I was really surprised that he's number 2 in Dream Team. I couldn't believe, I've got him down here 6th in SuperCoach, but number 2 in Dream Team, that's huge.
Well, you think about all those big names we've lost from the forward line: Dunkley, Boak, Dangerfield, Billings, Marshall. That was for many people the forward line that they had last year. And if Toby Greene now, outside of Lockie Whitfield in Dream Team and Fantasy, is the number 2 guy. You do bring up a really interesting point about it. Historically, he's been such a good scorer. You know, going back 2017 and also 2016, not talking too much about 2018 because he was injured for big chunks of that season, only getting to play just the 7 games. But in 2017, he played 16 of a possible 22 games in AFL Fantasy. He averaged 91. He scored multiple hundreds in that year. In fact, I think he didn't drop at all below 72. I think it was only in SuperCoach, he averaged 96, 5 tons. One was a 127 and a low of 70. So remember, look at that. That's not a heap of tons. 5 in SuperCoach, 4 in Dream Team and Fantasy, yet he's still averaging in the 90s. That shows you just that consistency of how high his scoring basement is, that he didn't really cost you in a matchup, even though he missed games. Similar in 2016. A really strong year again through there. 10 SuperCoach tons, 3 of them over 120. A seasonal average of 90 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. 8 tons and a seasonal average of 92.7. And if you started him last year, you do bring up an interesting point. I think he was ranked 20th in the 50 most relevant last year. He was coming in at a discounted price, Fox, and people that probably wanted to start him did so. He plays round 1, and you think, okay, not the strongest of starts from Toby Greene, to be fair. Entering in, you're like, right, I've got my discount forward here, and then he returns you a 64 in Dream Team and Fantasy, a 78 in Supercoach. Isn't seen again till round 6. By that time, most coaches have probably moved on.
Yeah, true that. And then when he got that role change from round 17 to 21, I think he, a few rounds there, he averaged 135 in Supercoach.
It was huge.
Can you believe that?
He was absolutely massive on the back run because, again, prior to that role change, and it was more forced out of necessity, that game where the role change took place at the MCG against Richmond, it was when Stephen Cornelio went down for his very now infamous 0 that could have cost people an absolute rankings and league matchups. He was forced to play in the midfield because Leon Cameron didn't have anyone else. And then with other additional injuries to Callan Ward and Josh Kelly, they just needed to hold him and another fellow member of the 50 most relevant, Zach Williams. Prior to the role change, in Fantasy and Dream Team, he was averaging 80 with only 2 tons and 77 in Supercoach with also only 2 tons. However, those final 6 games of the year, that is when we got to see some of the best of Toby Greene, and this is how his scoring went in Dream Team and Fantasy. 144, 115, 126, 146, 142, and a 99. Not bad. Supercoach, even better. 138, 112, 107, 134, 122, 115. Massive, massive, massive guy that if you had him in the run home, chances are he would have been unique matchup. Chances are he was unique in your overall rankings. He was one of, outside of Josh Dunkley, he was the form forward to end the year.
Oh, absolutely. And how many forwards have got that ceiling? So, like the enemy as
exactly. Like, really, it's Whitfield and arguably Dusty, probably in Supercoach, still has a ceiling like that. But all the other players, we look at our forward lines, the consistent frequency of 130, 140 scores, there's a handful, including him, that can do it, and that's it.
And just having a look at this year, the forwards, there's certainly a lack of forwards there, like that you can actually truly trust. Like I know Green has his trust issues too, but just going through them, geez, there's a lot of question marks on those top forwards. Apart from even Lockie Whitfield, he missed games.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, you do look
Michael
at those.
Walters.
Yep. Yeah, and look, maybe he'll appear in the 50 most relevant, maybe he won't, but you do bring up an interesting couple of points there, Fox. One is around that he does miss a lot of games. It's either through injury or suspension, even missing the elimination final match, where he infamously was suspended and almost missed out on playing in the grand final. It's of his 8 seasons in the AFL, just twice has he played 20 games or more. Just twice. So he does have this history, and it is a bit of an obstacle for us. And so I think because of that, we've talked about this with a number of players through the 50 most relevant, and the 2 points are very similar with Toby Greene. One, just because he's got a history of it doesn't mean it's not going to be that same way again. Brad Crouch 12 months ago had an injury history, yet played 22 games. Devon Smith, Taylor Adams. We talk about it consistently here at the coaches panel, is even though it's a history to be wary of, it's not an only indication of that's what he will do. Unless you've got a crystal ball and you don't know. All the history does give us, though, is an indication that because history does say he misses games, he's probably not the kind of guy you want to upgrade to, because either through injury or suspension, history would give us enough knowledge to suggest you're going to have to probably use a trade to then trade him out again because of a concern around durability and a little bit of a hot head. And so I suppose the question for you, and I've got another question, Fox, in a moment, but is he a starting squad only player and then you just rule a line out from him as an upgrade target, or can he be upgraded to during the year?
I wouldn't rule a line through him because that role change would bring him in, almost straight away. Like if a couple of guys went down, you'd bring him in. You'd bring him straight away. So you can never rule out a player, but starting like most sides are probably going to start Whitfield, Dusty. They're going to be probably the two
popular two, yeah.
The main ones, and then probably a sprinkling of will people trust Heaney?
Yep.
You know, and Green's right in the conversation. Depending on how many primo forwards you're going to start.
Well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? It's a very popular 1-2 lock of Dusty and Whitfield. If you are going for a third premium midfielder, again, maybe that's too top-heavy for you with some value players. We've already seen Devon Smith as one of those names come through in the 50 most relevant. Blake Acres was a player who kicked it off, let alone another like a Stephen Hill, who we've got the forward defensive flexibility. That's a good question to ask. Is it the year to go for 3 premium forwards, or are we not going to get the value out of it if we do?
Well, tough question. Really depends on how you format your side.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to go. If you go Gawn and Grundy, that combination is going to set up a lot of teams with that extra player. I would imagine that extra primo where that goes. We're not going to know the answer to that ruck situation until first week. You know, the week before.
Yeah, it's true. And we don't know what value rucks, are going to be primed for the picking. Nick New Year's, another player who's already come through the 50 most relevant. So it is all dependent on how people like to play the game.
He's definitely in the F3, in your team.
Starting squad conversation. Yeah, you're right. There's not many guys that have the consistency of averaging over 90. He does have that. There's not many guys that have the ceiling in the forward line. He has that. What he probably doesn't have is confidence that coaches go, yes, he's going to play the majority of games. I understand that hesitation. The other question I have is, what's the real Toby Greene? Because last year, prior to the role change, he was scoring and averaging in the 80s range, low 80s and 70s range, which is disgusting. Whereas historically, he was averaging, 90s, but in the final 6 games of the year, I think he was averaging in the low 120s across the formats. Which of those 3 Toby Greenes are we going to get this year?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like, the perfect Toby Greene is the guy that plays between, that gets those board entries and goal assists. Plays, that high forward role.
Yeah.
There's plenty of points there. But it all depends really on role. But he's definitely in the conversation.
Yeah, you do bring that great point up about role, and we've already talked about a number of other GWS players with Zach Williams, who's in a similar place of him. He really scored well on the run home. Can he retain those midfield minutes with Callan Ward returning, with a fit Josh Kelly, with a fit Stephen Cornelio, with the development of Jacob Hopper, Tim Taranto, who we talked about yesterday in the 50 most relevant. There's only so many points that can go around. As good as the side are with their fantasy-friendly points, there's only so much football that can be won, and it'll be fascinating to see the pre-season role that Toby Greene has and the roles of his other midfielders, because again, you might go, he's playing full midfield. But yeah, if Cornelio, Kelly and Taranto aren't playing that game, it could be a little of a deviation and something that kind of skews you off if you're not careful of.
Yeah, I think Leon Cameron, after that grand final loss, he might mix and match a few things too.
It's true.
To get, who knows what he's going to have, what cards he's going to play too.
Yep.
Really watch a lot of the early pre-season games just to see where these guys are actually going to fit.
Absolutely. Look, if someone like a Toby Greene's getting about 80% time forward and still getting 20% of opportunity through the midfield, I'm really confident that I don't see a world where he doesn't average 90 plus. The question's going to be, how many games does he play? And if you're prepared to take the risk and maybe looking to go for 3 starting forwards, I can really see a compelling case why Toby Greene is a genuinely good option for you. We lack forwards with ceiling and forwards we can trust. And maybe you can't trust Toby Greene, and that's okay. But in terms of ceiling, Whitfield is probably the only one across formats that can match him with that level of consistency of ceiling.
Yeah, absolutely right.
All right, well, let's talk about where he goes in a draft. He is currently ranked as the number 2 forward by average in DreamTeam and Fantasy, the number 6 in SuperCoach by average. Based on that, he's likely to be someone's F1. I suppose the two caveats, depending on how comfortable people feel about how early they draft him, is what value they place on injury-impacted games. I suppose that's a factor for coaches versus his role. Do you feel comfortable drafting him as an F1? Because I think that's where he goes regardless. But does he give you confidence as an F1 pick?
He's a definite F1, but the confidence factor is going to he's possibly going to slide. He's got a lot of history there.
Yeah, he does.
Especially with the face, the hands, the face, and that. Like if the penny's finally clicked with him,
yes,
yeah, you do, and you would hope it has, and you'd hope in a perfect world that he is highly rated there. And you would pick him, I think, how did he go with injury last year? Is that all behind him?
He missed after round 1. He was injured, and then he didn't come back till round 6. So he missed a 5-week stretch of games from there. And then pretty much from then to the end of the year, he played every game except round 23, where he missed that game as well. So, look...
So he's got the continuity going with the injury.
Pretty much. From round 6 onwards, he missed 2 games, including the final. One was suspension, one was just a bit of injury. Conservative move. I would have thought that round 23 game, if it was a final, he probably would have played, is my guess.
Yeah, I'd take a chance on him. I'd draft him at where you draft your F1. Now, whoever you're going to take first in the first round, second round, wherever you're going to draft your F1, I wouldn't be as hesitant as I would have been probably last year.
Yeah, and the key caveat question that you've got to factor in is there is, outside of Dusty and Whitfield, there are a lot of questions over a lot of forwards for most of the fantasy community. As such, if you've used maybe our friends, the Draft Doctors, mock draft simulator, which you can go and check out right now, by the way, they do drop away quite quickly, the forwards. And so even though he's got this injury risk, he does have the scoring that not many do. And so, because of that, he could disappear off draft boards as early as the 3rd round. Like, there could be that steep of a drop-off that people are like, I have to get one of these 90-plus averaging forwards as quickly as I can. And so it could be as early as round 3 he goes.
Yeah, if we look back at last year, like... a couple of those, it was because of role, but you've got that feeling. Like if he's playing that particular role come finals time, Jeff made a great decision.
Yeah, well, that's right. Exactly.
It's that feeling. That's going to win you. That's going to win you finals.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Remembering how we ended the year, averaging well over the 120 marker in every single one of the scoring formats, and had a ceiling that would make Josh Dunkley blush. That's how good he was going.
Well, that would have got you possibly into the prelims and grand finals, though, those scores, probably on the back of Toby Greene's little streak there at the end.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. I really like Toby Greene as an option this year. I think his ownership percentage is going to be fascinating to watch. Whether or not it's the right call to run him as an F3 or not, again, it'll be fascinating to watch throughout the preseason. But a couple of games through the midfield, even with all their stars there, and a lot of coaches could jump on because of that potential ceiling. Hey, Fox, I appreciate your thoughts today on Toby Greene.
Yeah, thanks, mate. See you later.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to go and check out the article on Toby or any of the other players revealed so far in the 50 most relevant, you can go and do that at coachespanel.tv. If you're loving the content you're getting from the Coaches Panel this pre-season, we'd love you to jump on board, become a Patreon, help support the Coaches Panel. As you do that, you'll get exclusive and early access content to a whole heap of stuff. The links for that also can be found at coachespanel.tv. We're venturing almost to the halfway marker of the 50 most relevant, and tomorrow we get to the player who lands at number 27.